Catholicism matches up very well with Old Testament Judaism. The Judaizers are condemned in the very book you started this program off with in Galatians. The works righteousness type of people that think their works are going to make hay with God. But just to briefly recap, just the Old Testament Jews had the high priest. Well, the Roman Catholics have the Pope. Well, this isn't what the New Testament says at all. Christ is the head of the church, not the Pope. And over here, of course, we're out of this dispensation, the Old Testament now, so we don't need a high priest because Christ is the high priest. And over here we have the priesthood of the Old Testament Jews. You have the priests in Roman Catholicism. It's almost like they're going back in time and skipping what the New Testament says. All believers are priests in the New Testament. And right down the line you have the temple, you have the cathedral, you have the holy city of Jerusalem. Well, here in Roman Catholicism you have the holy city of Rome. Passive laity, they don't do much. They kind of watch the priests do everything. And of course, in the New Testament, you find that believers do that. They labor under the law, works, as you mentioned, sacraments, penance, and whatnot. Of course, in the New Testament, it's grace. Church and state are one. Church and state are one. You got the Vatican. I think the Vatican is listed in the UN as a separate country or something like that.
We have a diplomat to the Vatican.
A diplomat to the Vatican. Interesting. And then punishment unto death, punishment unto death. Candles, altars, incense, and robes for the priests and all that religious activities. Do the same thing in Roman Catholicism, but it's not required in New Testament Christianity. And of course here we get back to what you're just talking about, the Mass, where Christ dies over and over again. And over here in the Old Testament they killed goats and lambs and oxen night and day, and the smoke burned on because it was never enough to atone for their sins. It would only atone up to that point, but the next day they might have committed some more sins and then they're in trouble again. And of course we know that Christ has died once for all for us. And when you talked about that unbloody sacrifice, well, when you read in Hebrews 9:22, it says, without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. So all these unbloody sacrifices do nothing if you go with what Hebrews says.